Hello, I'm Dr. Will Keim, and welcome to my home in Corvallis, Oregon. Corvallis is a city of about 50,000 people, the home of Oregon State University, Lynn Benton Community College, in the center of the Willamette Valley. The Willamette Valley, for those of you that love history, was called the Eden at the end of the Oregon Trail by the early pioneers. When they got here, there was grass and water and timber and resources, fish, game, everything they needed and had looked forward to crossing some of the more desolate plains was here. It's a beautiful place to live. And I have spent the last years of my life traveling across the United States, speaking on 3,000 campuses to 3 million students. And I've lectured in every state in the United States at least 5 times. What a journey, what an adventure. And I love being there with you. Normally when I'm there, I'm battling things like airlines, train schedules, time management. This year, a secret opponent stepped into the ring. I didn't see it coming, and that opponent's called cancer. And so I'm at home right now and I'm dealing with cancer the best I can, and I'm fighting it, and I've got a good medical team. But with my medical team and what I think is a positive attitude and your positive thoughts and prayers, I think I can beat this thing and be there next year live. That's my goal. So I'd like you to be that kind of part of my support team. If you're interested in being part of my support team, even from a distance, willkeim.blogspot.com. My children have convinced me to blog. I wasn't really that excited about doing it because I really sometimes don't have something to say. I know that's hard to believe. But after the first 2 days when the announcement got out across the country and I responded to 4,000 emails, I decided it might be more time effective simply to create a blog. So if you would like to be part of my support team and keep track of what's happening to me and be there for me in spirit or in positive thought, please drop into willkeim.blogspot.com. And next year, I'll be standing in for you live. I want to in particular thank Shane at Cloud County Community College in Kansas for allowing me to present this material via tape rather than live. Thank you, Shane. I appreciate the invitation. I was so looking forward to my first visit to your campus. But if it's okay with you, give us a call, talk to Donna, and we'll put it on the calendar for next year. We need to be optimistic, and I need your help to do that. Thanks, Shane. Hello, I'm Dr. Will Keim, and welcome to the Time of Your Life. I'm so excited to be with you today to share with you the 10 things you need to do to leave your college or university with your diploma in one hand and your self-esteem in the other. There's no magic potion. There's no special thing you need to do. You just need to focus on 10 things. And I want to tell you the thesis statement for my presentation, which has been the same for 25 years and has impacted 3 million students from 3,000 campuses in every state in the United States, as well as some countries overseas. And the thesis is this: you are now setting the banquet table for the glorious feast you're going to eat the rest of your life. Let me say that again so you can take it into the depths of your soul. You are setting the banquet table right now for the glorious feast you're going to eat the rest of your life. And if you were just going to eat off that table, you know what I'd tell you? Do what you want. You're now an adult. No more compensatory, mandatory education. Your parents aren't going to come in, wake you up, fix your meals, tell you what to do, drag you to class. That's all now your responsibility. But the reality is your children someday will eat off the table you set. Those of you that are older than average students who are coming back to school, or transfer students who have children, you already know what this means. But for most of you that are traditional age, children are in the future. But someday your child's going to come home and say, "Hey, Dad, I'm going to football practice." And you're going to go, "Did you do your homework?" And your child's going to go, "Did you?" And what you want to be able to say is, go into the den and look at my diploma from the university and watch your smart mouth, because if you don't do your homework, you're not going to play football. Or perhaps your daughter comes home and says, "Hey, I got into band camp. I got into art camp. I can go, it's great, but it costs $3,000. You want to be able to say, "Well, it'll be a stretch, you know, but we'll make it happen because you've worked hard." You don't want to say, "Nah, you can't have that opportunity because Daddy didn't pay attention to Dr. Keim in college. Mommy didn't listen. She was waiting for something else to happen." This is where you take care not only of yourself, but the future generations. And I know children might be a stretch for you, so let's talk about your parents. All of you got those. Someday your mothers and your fathers who planned for retirement but lived a long time and outlived their retirement will be able to stay in their home or have a single room at assisted living rather than living with 5 or 6 other people, because you have the resources, because you graduated, you left with your diploma and your self-esteem, you can take care of them. What a great gift that will be. Or your little brother, the surprise little brother or little sister that came 20 years after you, you're going to be able to say to them, "You know, you can go to that university because your aunt and I, your uncle and I, we can help." You are setting the banquet table for you and future generations of your family, and it's time to get busy. I'm not asking you to be saints. You don't have to be perfect, but you do have to do 10 things. And here's number one. You must be a scholar. A little tip for you. Everybody sitting around you in your classes is a survivor like you. They got knocked down every once in a while, but they got up like you, and now they're there. We've weeded out a bunch of people that maybe for economic reasons, maybe they didn't like school, maybe they've decided to get a valuable trade or vocation, they've gone another direction. But everybody in your classes is a hard worker. They're really smart like you. So it's not like you can just cruise through this. You've got to fire it up right now. You've got to be a scholar. You've got to get ready. You sit in the front row of the class. You take notes. You take your notes home at the end of the day and you recopy them in outline form. You meet every single professor and make sure they're grading a name and not a social security number. You know, these professors, I used to be one of them, sometimes we don't like office hours, and I'll tell you why. You know who comes to see us? Anal retentive A students who come in and say, I got a 98.6, I think I deserve a 99.2. You know who we really want to see? We want to see those of you that are struggling, those of you that may have a diagnosed or undiagnosed learning disability, those of you that are worried about your parents or worried about your home situation or finances or your younger brother and sister. We want to see those of you that have issues, but we want to see it before it gets to crisis. So I want you to sit in the front row, take notes, recopy them in outline form at the end of the day so you've got 25 pages at the end of the term to review instead of 50 pages you can't read. Meet your professors and be a good consumer of the product education. In Nairobi, Kenya, they're studying 7 days a week. At the Sorbonne in France, 7 days a week. At the University of Shanghai, 7 days a week. All over the world, students are studying 7 days a week, including summers. And in America, college students say, Thursday, the weekend, all right. You need to stop that. And you need to apply yourselves. And you need to push yourselves. And you must be a scholar. All of you have higher test scores than I do. How do I know that? Because I know my test scores. My test scores were abysmal, and yet I have a PhD because you know what they call the guy that graduates last in his doctoral class? They call him doctor. I'm a junkyard dog. Most of you are smarter than me, but I'll outwork you. And here's the issue with that. You must finish your degree. You must, no matter what's gone on in the past, start anew. If you're a great student, be greater. If you're good, be great. If you're average, strive for good. But you have it. One time I mentioned my SAT score, which I will not do today. I did that at a famous university called MIT in Massachusetts. You might know it as MIT. That's a tribute to Modern Family. And I said my SAT score. And what happened? A young man yelled out of the audience, with that score, we're lucky you could find the room. Ooh, laughter, nervous laughter. I said, you know, son, you are smarter than me, and so is every other student at MIT. But in my defense, I can get a date. I'm telling you something right now. He almost came down and took off his pocket liner, but he didn't, thank goodness, because I would not have turned the other cheek. I told him, I shall smite thee. Be the best scholar you have the potential to be. Number two, be a servant. After you've done your homework, after you've read the suggested additional reading and met your professor, your notes are in order, I want you to step out into the community in which you live. And it doesn't matter whether you live in a city or out in a rural area. And I want you to serve the people around you. I was never so proud to be an athlete as when I went over to an old folks home to take them some things. And there was a group of baseball players there. And these baseball players were all dressed up. And I knew the catcher. And I said, Mitch, what are you doing? And he said, nothing. And I said, Mitch, you're all dressed up in suits and there's a whole bunch of you at an old folks home. What are you doing? He said, I'd rather not say. I said, that's not going to work today, son. He said, well, Dr. Keim, to be honest with you, he said, tomorrow's Valentine's Day and every year our team comes over here the day before Valentine's Day and we dance with the old ladies. Now, I suspect there was a little bit of a "ah" in the crowd because that's what usually happens when I'm live and in person. The reality is, the reason people go "ah" is because it's sweet. It's kind. Those old women were so excited to see those baseball players, they put extra blue in their hair. And the men weren't real liberal. They wouldn't dance with those guys, so they said, don't you got any girls at that college? So the next year, the baseball team went over to the softball team. And they said, hey, we're going to dance with some old ladies on Friday. And the softball team went, oh. And they said, would you go dance with the men? And those old men know how to dance. They put their hand out here. Those young women would put their hands there. Then those old men, knowing something you young guys need to learn right now from Dr. Keim, they would put their other hand in the small of a woman's back, which I testify before you is one of the finest places God has put on the earth. And they would dance and dance and dance, and the music would stop. But those old guys, they had it going. They just kept dancing. And pretty soon somebody go, Barney, the music stopped. Not in my mind, it's not. Barney, let her go. We'll get the tranquilizer gun. 1 hour a year, and those old people had something to look forward to. Do you have an hour to do something like that? And maybe you're uncomfortable around older people because you didn't spend a lot of time with grandma and grandpa. What about children? Some of you can teach them to play soccer. Some of you can teach them to do math. Some of you can teach them how to stand up straight if they're tall girls and they're starting to worry about being taller than the boys. You all have a gift. I took a group of students down to the University of Oregon one time in Eugene. I live in Corvallis. And we took a group of students down there to an elementary school, and everybody paired up real quick except one little girl. And I'm telling you right now, she was the stinkiest little thing I'd ever been around. Seriously, you could smell her from where she was standing. And I said, do you want to play some sports? She goes, you want to play basketball? Who? And I said, sure, let me teach you about a zone defense, because I knew that would give us some space between us. And then I got to feeling bad about that, so I invited her over. And I said, hey, this is how to shoot a free throw. I taught her how to check somebody else off, how to do a crossover dribble. And then I said, hey, I got to go home now, take the students home. And she said, hugs, and I hugged her. And I looked over, and the principal was crying. And I said, seriously, it was an all hands on deck shoulder hug. And the principal said, no, she's a homeless girl. She lives with her mother under the Mackenzie River Bridge, and she doesn't get to shower in the late fall and winter because it's so cold. And she does smell, and nobody will play with her. Thank you. I want you to be clear, this is not a story about what a nice guy I am. It's about how much need is in your community if you step out of feeling sorry for yourself, or step out of worrying about only having $50 left at the end of the month, and spends every time you give it away. And you can look this up. It's in the Bible, it's in the Talmud, it's in the Bhagavad Gita, it's in the teachings of Buddha, it's in the Quran. Every time you give something to someone else, it comes back at you 100-fold. It's just good secular humanism. You take care of people, they take care of you. So number 2, I want you to serve the community. You study, then you serve. Number 3, I want you to make peace with people regardless of race, creed, color, national orientation, or sexual orientation. When I said sexual orientation, sadly, at a church-related school that I'm familiar with, and I'm a church guy, I said sexual orientation there, and a man stood up and said, you are the Antichrist. And I said, wow, sit down, judgmental friend. And he said, I'm going to pray for you. And I said, well, I need the prayers and you need the practice. I love my country. I pay my taxes and I vote, so I pretty much say whatever I want. And this is a great, great country. But we've picked on almost everybody, from the Irish to the Germans to the Italians to the Asian Americans. We've picked on African American. We're running out of groups to pick on, which is exciting. And then since we all found each other attractive and we're kind of, having families that cross all of these diverse divides, now we're picking on the gay, lesbian, transgender, bisexual community. And believe me, I'm not trying to tell you what to think, but I am going to tell you there's not one of us in this room, not one of us that's living our life so righteously that we should judge other people. I didn't know this was an issue till I took my oldest daughter, who was then 6, into a men's bathroom, because that's what you do when you're a guy and or a gal, you have an opposite sex child. You take them into your bathroom because you're not going to take them into the women's bathroom. But my daughter was smart and rather precocious, and she said, Daddy, why do we have to go into the boys' room? I'm a girl. And I said, well, honey, you are a girl. You're a smart girl, you're a pretty girl, you're an athletic girl. But when Daddy goes into girls' rooms, he scares people. So we walked in to the men's room and she said, Daddy, and I said, what? And she said, that man has a small penis. And to be honest with you, he did, but she shouldn't have said it. And so then I realized I couldn't take her in there anymore. And by the way, everybody in the thing, including the guys in the stalls who were beating the walls, thought it was hilarious. Everybody except the guy she had identified. He's probably in therapy now. I took her into the girls' room, knocked on the door. Hello, Dr. Keim, bringing my daughter Krista in. If you're in there, say something. I put her into the stall. It was astounding, women, astounding. Women seem to be able to go to the bathroom without writing things on the wall. And I know every single woman right now, every single mother is going, well, yeah, why would we do that? But those of you that are men know where I'm going now. And that is, there are apparently some men who sit down, okay, after they have taken their pants down, pulled down their underwear to take care of a basic human need, and then they take out a pen and write, kill the fags. Isn't that an odd time to be thinking about gay men? You see, I don't think about gay men when my pants are down, but some of you must. I don't think the gay guys are in there going, kill me. I don't think the African American, Asian American, Hispanic American, Native American men are in there writing horrible things about themselves. And it's just, the one I saw that I loved was, Arab Iranian bastards go home, which was after 9/11. And then I remember thinking to myself, there's 2 problems with that. 1, if they were born here, they are home. And 2, Iranians are Persians, not Arabs. But then again, I am cursed with this thing called knowledge. My daughter's friend, Marcy Haley, who was adopted from India, when she was a tiny little girl, wonderful woman, married, couple of kids now, professional. Marcy was walking down the street once in Corvallis, which is a university, open-minded, quasi-liberal town, and two guys pulled up in a pickup and said, go back to Arabia, you bitch. And she said, I'm Indian, you morons. And they said, then go back to the reservation. Because stupid is as stupid does. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to try to get along with people regardless of race, creed, color, national orientation, or sexual orientation. There was a Jewish kid one time who had no formal education who wound up being a pretty great public orator. And he stood on a rise in the Middle East and he looked out over a crowd of 10,000 people. And after having been asked what his central teachings were, because he was a teacher, they called him rabbi, he said, blessed are the peacemakers. You can look that up. So you're going to study, you're going to serve, and you're going to make peace with others because you make peace with yourself. Number 4, I want you to be men and women of character. Say what you mean, do what you say, and when you don't, admit it. I'm not asking you to be, sometimes we make mistakes. Mark Twain said, always tell the truth. It will amaze half the people and astonish the rest. So say what you mean, do what you say, and when you don't, admit it. Students, try this. Professor, I didn't get my homework done. Well, Steve, why not? Well, to be honest with you, I went to a volleyball game this weekend. I met a girl. She'd been in my orientation group in the summer. I wanted to talk to her then, but I was too nervous. But I realized that the worst mistake you can make in college is trying to be cool. So I approached her. We went to a volleyball game. I talked to her for 7 hours. The next day we had pizza. We went on a really nice road trip. I talked to her for 7 hours. It seemed like 15 minutes. Professor, I'm going to be honest with you. I looked into her eyes and I thought I saw my unborn children. I mismanaged my time. I'll get my homework in on Wednesday. After the professor gets up off the ground because he or she's heard the truth for the first time, you're going to get extra credit. But we never do that. We go, Professor, I didn't get my homework done. Well, why not? A pterodactyl flew down from Puyallup, Washington, and pooped on my assignment. Do you think the professors haven't heard every legitimate excuse? And do you think 3 of your friends going, no, I saw it, it was huge, is going to corroborate your BS? Say what you mean, do what you say, and when you don't, admit it. And here's a good starter. If you're a new student away from home the first time and you had a girlfriend, a boyfriend, a partner, a significant other, a lover, I know that's hard for you parents to hear the word lover, but let's just call it a boyfriend or girlfriend. If you're away from home for the first time and you told that person you'd be faithful, then be faithful. And if you're going to see other people and have an open relationship, then go home and change that so you don't have somebody waiting for you at home while you're playing the field. That just doesn't seem quite right, does it? Number 5, I want you to be healthy. And health is kind of my code word for a thing called sex. It's often been said when you say sex, most people tone out for the next 7 to 15 seconds thinking about a variety of things. It makes our nation very, very nervous, which is why we don't talk about it enough. Which is why we have the highest teen pregnancy rate of any of the 13 industrialized nations. Which is why we have the greatest acquisition of STDs and HIV and AIDS of any of the 13 industrialized nations. Which is why in our nation last year there were over 200,000 abortions, because we don't prepare people to have discussions about it. And I want to talk to you about it today, and I want to tell you there's 2 ways to be sexually responsible. The first one is this. It's okay not to have sex. I know that's a radical concept these days, a radical concept, but it's okay not to have sex. When I said this at Penn State University, one of the football players, who's a wonderful guy playing in the NFL now, he came up to me and he said, Dr. Keim, you're the first guy that affirmed abstention. I'm trying to save myself. I said, well, kudos and blessings to you. He said, most of the speakers come in with a banana and a condom. He said, frankly, I'm afraid to eat fruit salad. I said, oh my goodness, that's the best line I've ever heard. He goes, is that funny? He goes, people say I'm not very funny. I said, that's a great line. It's okay not to have sex. It's a great way not to get pregnant. It's a great way not to get STDs. It's a great way not to get HIV and AIDS. It's a great way not to have regrettable sexual experiences, which on particular small campuses, you know you're going to see, folks. And lastly, it's a great way not to have sexual flashbacks on your honeymoon. Bet you never thought about that. Yes, Steve. Yes, Steve. Yes, Steve. Oh my God, Jamil. There's nothing that quite takes you out of the mood like hearing somebody else's name whispered in your ear. Sadly, some of you may know what I'm saying. The rest of you are just going to have to trust me on that one. It's okay not to have sex. But if you choose to be sexual, I want you to practice safer sex. And we've taught you that, and that information's available. I'm not going to belabor that point. But any speaker you have from this point forward that comes to your campus and talks about safe sex is a moron. Sex is never safe. Is anything as powerful as sex, psychologically, physiologically, spiritually, should never be called safe. It can be called safer. But I want you to either abstain and feel good about that, or I want you to practice safer sex. And by the way, men, none of you pray like this. Dear God / Big Bang Theory, I'm being inclusive. Dear God, I want to get married someday. I want her to be smart. I want her to want to have a career. I want her to want to have a family. And one more thing, Lord, I want her to have slept with at least 6 football players, 3 linemen, 2 guys from the skill positions, and a kicker. When I said that at a major school in the SEC, the kicker stood up and went, yeah, because nobody likes the kickers, unless there's 7 seconds left in the game and we're down by 2, and then the kickers are elevated to a position of high respect. Kickers, you hang in there. You don't want somebody practicing with your future wife. Why are you trying to practice with somebody else's? And women, I lettered 4 years, Division I baseball. I never heard this in a locker room. You know Teresa? Yeah, she's really loose. Yes, I respect her too. I honestly don't believe as women you deserve any additional respect for being women, but you do deserve respect for being human beings. And male or female, you deserve to be respected. It's okay not to have sex, but take care of yourself. Number 6, I want you to be spiritual men and women in the widest possible sense. I want you to find something in life to believe in greater than yourself. And whether you find that in a church, a mosque, a synagogue, whether you find that in a forest, maybe you find it in great literature, the Constitution of the United States should always be honored first. And the Constitution gives us the right to read our Bible, our Talmud, our Koran, our Bhagavad Gita, the teachings of Buddha, great secular writings by brilliant men and women. I want you to honor that. And so we honor the Constitution by honoring other people's expressions of their spirituality. The problem with thinking that you're at the center of the universe is that you wind up appearing to people to be a narcissist or an ass. And you don't have to be religious to be spiritual. It was Sister Joan Chittister, the great Roman Catholic nun, that once said, and I think partially kidding, but there's always some truth in humor, religion is for people that are afraid to go to hell. Spirituality is for those of us that have already been there. Scarred by struggle, transformed by hope, the source. I want you to be spiritual men and women, and here's the deal. Sometimes you go, I don't go to church, Dr. Keim, because it's filled with hypocrites. And as a church guy, I go, gosh, you know what, you're right. But if you tell me you find the Spirit on top of a mountain or fly fishing, I'm going to ask you when the last time you stood on the top of a mountain or went fly fishing. I'm not going to proselytize my beliefs because, as Rabbi Larry Kushner said, I have always found one spirituality and spiritual security to be a direct barometer of that person's own spiritual security. Meaning the more I can tolerate you and affirm what you're doing, the more I really believe, the more time I spend trying to force what I believe down your throat, in reality that raises some serious questions about whether I am spiritually centered and truly believe what I believe. And in America, this has been a diverse nation since 10,000 Native American tribes lived here alone. We honor diversity. It is our greatest national strength. Number 7, I want you to be free from dependence on alcohol and other drugs. And I'm not going to tell you not to drink because I'm not your dad. You have dads and moms and guardians. The reality is this though. How many of you, please raise your hand, how many of you are under 21? Wow. You know, it's weird. I've been doing this for a long time. And every time I deal with most new student classes, freshmen, first years, it's always the same. Have you ever considered the proposition that it's legal for you not to drink? I know, come with me, it's kind of a weird concept, like abstention from sex. It's a new concept I'm introducing. It's legal for you not to drink. You want a beer? No thanks. What are you, some kind of wimp? No, I'm 19. It's legal for me not to drink. If you knew, okay, that 3/4 of all women that are sexually assaulted on college campuses, alcohol is involved. If you knew that 2/3 of all mental cruelty divorces were alcohol related in this country, if you knew that 60% of all divorce cases, 60% of all homicides, if you knew that 80% of people who fail out of school have a problem with alcohol, if you knew, and now you do, that 22,000 people die on the highways every year directly related to alcohol, wouldn't you think it'd be something to approach with some kind of caution or wisdom and not just throwing a bunch of stuff in a trash can at a party and drinking something you don't know? I want you to be smarter than that. I've buried some people in my volunteer role as a campus minister. And nothing makes me sadder than to look at parents who have to realize that they're going to grow old without their child. A young man or woman who's never going to reach the fruition of their academic potential, never going to be a dad, a mom. It makes me sad and it's heartbreaking. And meanwhile, their friends are sitting in the church, synagogue, or mosque and they're saying, why did this have to happen? Why? Because we talk about being friends. We talk about caring. But there's not one of you who doesn't know which of your friends drinks too much. There's not one of you that doesn't know which of your friends needs to study more. There's not one of you that within 2 weeks at the college will know who needs to treat people with a little more respect. The people yelling the most and drinking the most are the people with the lowest self-esteem. And the reason I know that is because that was me. The more I could yell and drink and take the attention off myself, the more I didn't want you asking about my home. I didn't want you asking about all my parents who'd been divorced a total of 8 times together. I didn't want you asking where I lived because we moved 36 times when I was a kid because we didn't pay our rent. I didn't want you asking about my idyllic childhood because I was sexually assaulted when I was 8 years old. So what did I do? I medicated myself and pushed the attention out on you with humor and sarcasm and all that. It needs to stop. And you have this information now because I just gave it to you. So I want you to be free from dependence on alcohol and other drugs. I say alcohol and other drugs because there's a lot of people that would like to separate alcohol out and say alcohol and drugs. Alcohol is a drug. As a matter of fact, if it was introduced today, you'd have to get a prescription to get it. That's how powerful it is. So I simply say to you this: if you have problems when you drink, you're a problem drinker. Doesn't have to do with how much you drink, when you drink, okay, where you drink. If you have problems when you drink, you're a problem drinker. The other thing you tell me sometimes, and especially my students now in a couple of states that have legalized this, and by the way, we have 5 medical marijuana dispensary places in my town of 50,000, and there are some people who seriously need marijuana to deaden the pain of diseases that they're facing. I get that, I affirm that. But the reality is my students go, well, marijuana is just the same as alcohol. And I always tell them, really, when was the last time one of your friends who wasn't stoned ate a 5-pound block of cheese? Marijuana is not the same as alcohol in the eyes of the federal government, and at this point, the significant majority of states. Check the box that says you've been convicted of a drug-related misdemeanor or felony, and call me when you get your first job interview. Alcohol and drug abuse is the #1 equal opportunity unemployment facilitator. You're smarter than that. Number 8, you need to let go. Of what? You need to let go your anger and blaming of your parents. You know, I used to have 4 theories and no kids. Now I have 4 kids and no theories. I have grandchildren now, and you know what they are to me? Well, they're the most blessed thing in the world, my little Addie and Harvey. They're mulligans for me. Those of you that are golfers will have to explain this to the non-golfers. A mulligan's a do-over. You hit a ball that goes way off course, and if you're in a tournament, you can't do this, but most friends will go, take a mulligan, which means you get a second chance. That's what I think my grandkids are, not to worry about all the stupid stuff I used to worry about with my kids, and to relax and just enjoy them. They're not better than my children, but it's a second chance. You need to let go. You know, someday you're going to get a chance to be parents, and the cool thing about that for your parents is they get to be your grandparents. And that's why I always tell those of you that are parents watching this, if your son or daughter gets a weird piercing and a tattoo someplace that you don't understand, if you make a big deal about it, there'll be a second piercing and another tattoo. What you need to do is be smart parents and guardians and grandparents and take pictures of it so that someday when your daughter's giving her daughter a hard time about her little tattoo, you can take her aside and say, Tiffany Renee, let me show you a picture of a squirrel that your mommy's got on her right butt cheek. You see, that's payback time. You got to prepare for this. It just can't happen. But those of you that are students, your parents did the best job they could. So I'm giving you 2 choices because I don't like to back you into a corner. Number 1, you need to forgive your parents for not being perfect. If you're still mad at your mom or dad for them getting divorced when you're 6 years old, you're not going to be able to function at the university. If normal is what most people do, more people are divorced in this country than are still married. I mentioned my parents' divorces. When my wife and I got married December 22nd, 1979 in Yosemite National Park at the little chapel there, our 4 parents in the front row had 14 marriages between the 4 of them. If normal is what most people do, those of you from divorced homes are really more normal than those of the people that, in my opinion, have been blessed by their parents making a commitment and staying together. It's not a curse. It's not something that you can't overcome. It's not something that necessarily is a negative thing, because truly, if people are beating each other up psychologically or physically, they should be apart. The reality is this: cut your parents some slack. So you either forgive them, and sometimes it's hard because sometimes parents are abusive. I'll never forget the young woman from Springfield College in Massachusetts. And I used to be the kind of person that would say, go home and thank your parents for doing a great job, which I will get to in a minute. Well, this little girl charged me after my speech, and she was a little red-haired soccer player, and she was coming hard down. And my dad's old school, kind of a Humphrey Bogart, John Wayne kind of guy for you older dads. And he told me never to hit women, which I think is still good advice. But this woman was coming hard, and I was kind of getting ready to stop her when she just pulled up, because you know how soccer players are. They can stop on a dime, okay? And she said, I'm not going to thank my my dad. And I said, well, that's up to you. Why not? And she said, because my dad forced me to have sex with him from the time I was 12 till I left for college. That was heartbreaking for me, and she and I wound up being friends because we talked for a few years about that. And I got her to go get some counseling. And that's what I'm saying to you is, if you can't get over it by yourself, if you can't let it go, your anger, talk to an RA, talk to an orientation leader, talk to your dean of students, okay? Go in and see a counselor. And if you see one of your friends coming out of the counseling office, I don't want you to say, ooh, I didn't know that Tiffany Renee had problems, because the only people in life that don't have problems all live in the same place. And that place is called the cemetery. So get some professional help or cut your parents some slack. But if they did a good job, freak them out today before they leave campus, if they're on campus for orientation, or if they're at home and you're going to see them, or you can call them, text them, whatever you do. I want you to tell them, hey, Mom, Dad, hey, Grandma, hey, Aunt Betty. We had a guy come speak at our college. It was unbelievable. And he's kind of a crazy guy, but he said we should thank you. And so I just wanted to say to you, thanks for everything you did for me. Your parents will probably have you drug tested. They'll be so shocked that you've said that to them, because we don't say it to them. Both my parents are gone now, and there's just some things I wish I'd have said to Jack and Betty. I wish I'd have said it to them. Some of you complain about your parents because they're in your life or they want to know what's going on. My real dad died 3 months before I was born. You know, I would have loved to have the opportunity to reach the conclusion that he was too involved in my life. You know, there's always somebody around you suffering just a little bit more than you are. And your parents are suffering, especially for some of them, because what will happen this afternoon if they're leaving campus, or if it happened earlier, you know this to be true. The tough guy dads are the ones that my heart goes out to the most, because inevitably they're the tough guy. They're playing it cool until they realize they're saying goodbye. Do you understand that the day you were born was the greatest day in your parents' lives? Do you get that? Do you understand? I will remember February 13th the rest of my life, because that's the day Donna gave birth to Krista, and my whole perspective of life, love, what was important changed. That's etched in my mind. It'll be one of my last thoughts. Things get a little strange from there, but you need to thank them, because they won't always be here, and you don't want to be sitting someday at their memorial service envying your sister or your brother who made peace with them and forgave and moved on. Okay? You don't want to be envious. Say what you mean, do what you say, and when you don't, admit it. Number 9, I'm about to teach you the secret of college life. And I know you think that there's got to be some great formula for this, or there's some mystical, weird understanding. And God knows, as academics, those of us that get the PhDs, we really like sometimes to make things more complex than they need to be. I get that, and I do it sometimes. But here's the deal. The secret of college life is this. Find something you love to do and learn to do it well enough that somebody will pay you to do it. Again, find something you love to do and learn to do it well enough that somebody will pay you to do it. Those of you that might be parents watching this, your children are going to choose some really weird things, but this is their life. Didn't you live your life? Didn't you make your choices? Didn't you decide what you were going to do? They need that same right, that same privilege. So if they come home and say, I'm going to be an Indo-Chinese art major, say, wow, that's interesting. Okay? And read up on it. The average student changes their major over 3 times still to this date, so that might not be at the end, but the bigger deal you make of it, the more of a forbidden fruit you make it. And students, I want you to find something you can get up and do with passion. And these days it's all about, get a job, the only purpose of an education. You're going to make more money. You can look at an American Council on Education study, which will tell you over a lifetime with a college degree, you'll make way more than $1 million more than people without it, unless they just get lucky. A college education still financially pays off, but let's talk about what kind of person you become. Let's talk about your worldview. Let's talk about your ability to move interculturally and with great diversity in different languages around the world as the world continues to shrink. I want you to be excited, and I want you to pick something you love. I'll never forget my favorite example, and I'll tell you what he's doing now in just a minute. I came down in my residence hall. I was a hall director at Oregon State University, and I heard this big, rich voice. And I went down, and there was a young man sitting there, and I said, was that you? And he said, did I bother you? I said, no, did you have a CD on, or was that you? He said, no, that was me. I was rehearsing. I said, you have a gift. I said, would you come sing at my church? And he was an African-American gentleman from Oakland, California, up here in Oregon, where we talk more about diversity than we actually live it. And I said, will you come sing at my church? And he said, are there a lot of black people in your church? And I said, are you high? You're living in Oregon now. He came to my church and sang Amazing Grace, which for you non-church people is one of the church's top 10 hits. You just have to trust me on this. With such passion that a Caucasian woman yelled amen. And outside the South, in Baptist churches, you hardly ever see that. It was phenomenal. So I said to him, what are you going to be? And he goes, I'm going to be a music teacher. And I said, no, you will be that someday, but I mean now. And he goes, what do you mean? I said, you're going to be a vocal performance major. He said, what are the chances of me earning my living in vocal performance? Much like some of your parents, your relatives, your cynical older brothers and sisters have said to you, what are the chances of you earning your living, being in a band, being a cartoonist, being a photographer, being whatever? And I said, slim and none. But I don't want you to be an old person with regrets. The worst thing in the world is a cynical old person with regrets. Actually, that's not true. The worst thing in the world is a cynical 20-year-old who somehow has gotten to the point where nothing matters, and that breaks my heart. I want you to be realistic optimists. I don't necessarily need you to be an optimist. Admiral Stockdale said an optimist sometimes dies of a broken heart because things never work out the way they want. I don't want you to be a realist because a realist can get cynical real quickly. But I want you to be what Admiral Stockdale called a realistic optimist, and that's somebody who looks square into the face of a problem, like I'm looking in the face of my problems right now, and somehow figures out a way to get around them. That's a powerful thing, realistic optimism. So finally I convinced him to declare vocal performance. He went to Northwestern after he left Oregon State, got a master's degree in vocal performance and conducting. His first job out of graduate school was in a little thing called Showboat on Broadway. You might know that it ran for 7 years and won the Tony Award. His second job on Broadway was in a little thing called Porgy and Bess. Won the Tony. He just toured around the United States with Porgy and Bess and is now auditioning again in New York City where he lives. I'm telling you, each of you has a gift. When I found out you could get paid to talk, I just about passed out. Paying me to speak, in many ways, is like paying a cow to poop in a field. If you went up to the cow and said, if you poop, we'll give you oats, he would lift his tail up real straight, he'd make a pile, and he'd get his oats. I get paid to speak. One time, one of the city kids from Chicago, one of my favorite cities, said, Dr. Keim, I have a question about your speech. I was thinking, was it about being a scholar? Was it about being a community servant? Was it about being a peacemaker, a man or woman of character? Was it about being sexually responsible? Was it about spirituality? Was it about being free from dependence on alcohol and other drugs? Was it about forgiving your parents? Was it about this? He said, why do cows stick their tail out straight when they poop? I said, son, this isn't science. They don't want to crap on themselves. They're unable to sit on a toilet. Sometimes you have to explain things to people. I want you to understand that you have to follow your heart. And if you can get up every day and go to a job, no matter how much money you make, if you can go to a job every day that gives you joy, that you're passionate about, you'll really never work a day in your life. If money made people happy, and I want to be clear with you, I'd rather be rich and happy than poor and happy. But if money made people happy, wouldn't this be the happiest country in the world? Because even with recessions and temporary setbacks, wouldn't we be dancing in the streets if money made people happy? And yet last year we spent $150 billion on alcohol and imported 150 metric tons of cocaine. This is the most sedated society since the fall of Rome. What's the operative word in that phrase? Fall. And how can, one of our recent presidents said, how can a nation where people live free to choose and travel with so many options, the city set on a hill, a place that still claims a great majority of national prizes in math and science, in a variety of fields. How can a nation that dominates the world media, how can we feel so bad about ourselves? We've lost perspective on what it means to be happy. I'm going to tell you right now what it means to be happy. It's being needed. And each of you students, as well as you parents and administrators and faculty and staff watching, never has a nation needed an educated citizenry more than it does now since Thomas Jefferson issued that great line. A nation's great defense, President Jefferson said, a nation's greatest defense, hey, is an educated citizenry. And this is your time to receive that education and to find your passion. That is the secret of college life. And lastly, number 10, the most important thing I came to tell you, and I really want you to hear this. So I'm going to say the number, and I know that I'm not in the room with you, so I'm just going to have to trust you. I want you to say it after me. 25,000. No, seriously, I'm not kidding. 25,000. Good. 25,000. What is that? That's the number of days you had left, the day your blessed mother, your birth mother, gave birth to you. The day you were born, you had 25,000 days left. Here's the wake-up call. The youngest one of you in this room right now, maybe there's a little brother, a little sister, so we won't count you. We'll see you in a few years. But right now, the youngest one in this room has already spent 6,500 of your 25,000 days getting to the university, getting to the college. 1/4 of your entire life is already over. How's it going? And right now, I know that you're sitting in the room looking like deer in headlights. It's coming at me really fast, but I can't move. I'm frozen with fear. Boy, it's time to live without fear. A life lived in fear is a life half lived. A life that isn't an adventure, Helen Keller said, is a life not lived. It has to be adventurous, it has to be full, and it means that you take the last 18,500 days left that you have, and you get busy, and you set the banquet table. You are great young men and women. You have unlimited potential to do great things. You came to college giving more hours to volunteer projects than any generation that's ever come to college. You speak more languages than any generation that's ever come to college. You get along with diverse and different people better than any generation that comes to college. And frankly, other than some parents out there that might work for Microsoft or might work for Dell or might work for Google, your technological skills scare the hell out of people my age. You can do things with computers and smartphones that we simply don't even understand. We are cavemen and cavewomen as you hold these objects and create these websites and communicate with each other around the world. And we are going, ooh, ooh, like the Neanderthals did before us when somebody made something round that rolled. It's amazing. You are amazing. But if I ask you for a notebook, most of you could give me one because you have one now. If I asked you for something to drink, there's somebody in this room with a bottle of water. If I asked you for a hat because I wanted to shade my eyes, somebody could give it to me. But if I ask you for love and respect, and you do not love and respect yourself, how can you give me something you don't have? It's time for you to start assessing the good points that you have. It's starting with you to realize that Lisa Fernandez, one of the greatest softball pitchers ever, tremendous young woman, she was actually coached by my cousin Deb in high school. Lisa Fernandez, when they said, what's the key to your tremendous success? She said, every day I try to make my strengths stronger and my weaknesses my strengths. Again, my strength stronger and my weakness is my strength. It's time for you to let the past go, to take out the little tape, the CD, the little thing in your head that says, I can't, you won't, you will never get there. That negative voice, throw it away and put in what I've just told you. And that is, you've got 18,500 days left to make a masterpiece. Sometime, as you know, if you watch the introduction, sometimes things come into your life that may threaten getting 25,000 days. That just makes them more precious. And you should all operate as if life is a one-ticket ride. You should understand we're working without a net, and this is your moment. If I can help any of you, I put my message on videotape for you. I put my message on YouTube for you. I've put my message in the form of books, old school and ebooks. I want to help you because I'm going to grow old. My plan is to grow old in a world you were in charge of. And for you parents and administrators, these young people right now will determine the quality of health care you get as a senior citizen. I think all of us that are older should be paying it forward. I have complete faith in you. You need to have faith in yourself. So lastly, Godspeed and welcome to the time of your life.